On this episode of Just Informed Talk, we're going to discuss something that's becoming an incredibly important issue. We're going to discuss the control that certain individual companies have over what you see and hear on the internet. We're going to discuss that with a good friend of mine coming in to go over the details of what's been happening. You guys are going to stick around and check it out. Welcome, folks, to another episode of Just Informed Talk. I want to give a great special introduction to my friend Alex Phillips from the so many different things, but I guess I'll give him a short, brief introduction. He's the founder of the American Priority Foundation. He's the host of the American Priority Conference, which is coming up in October down in Miami. And he's also the former president of the Wireless Internet Service Provider Association, and among many other things. That's just a few. But welcome, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking about this topic.
Yeah. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about basically freedom of speech on the internet and how it is being basically trampled on. We're going to talk about the Internet Bill of Rights, this concept that's floating out there. And a lot of different people have a lot of different ideas for how it should work. Some people think it should be more of a government regulation. Other people think it should be more of a by the people regulation form. And I hate to say it, but I think Alex is in the latter. Actually, I like to say it, actually. I think he's got a great idea. So I'm going to give him the floor for a minute to give you kind of a brief background, if you will, Alex, about, why do we need the Internet Bill of Rights, and then you can maybe go into how what it would look like. You know what I mean?
Well, everybody's heard of the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, and, the first one being the, freedom of speech, and the second being the right to bear arms, and and so on and so forth. And these ideas are there. They were developed as laws as our base of our Constitution to protect the public from an overbearing government. And they've lasted for a long time, and they've been very useful to protect the public and give the public a voice in their government. And I think that what we're seeing now going on the internet is a big change, and people are kind of confused as to why this is happening. People think, well, I'm in the United States and I should have freedom of speech, but you get on Twitter and Facebook or what platform at the end. And so I just kind of want to set the stage for.
Let me just interrupt you for a second, because I think you might have cut out there for a second. Probably about 10, 30 seconds, 10, 20 seconds back. So if you want to just kind of restate that, I'm sorry about that.
Well, so in the internet world, people think that they are, living in the United States, they have the same rights and privileges on these internet platforms that they do, in the real world, and it's not the case at all. So people have been censored, people have been shadow banned, all the different names for it. Deplatformed, demonetized, everything that they can do to kind of stifle, your ability to speak about what you want to talk about. And to really kind of understand that, you've got to kind of look back at some analogs. And the only analog that I like to talk about that I think is most appropriate is the old days of the railroads, because the internet is sort of like the railroads of the past, where these corporations that were funded by the government in some cases, and probably in most cases, built these railroads, and they built them to towns that they built, and they controlled the towns. So the railroad company controlled the town, they were the law, they were the business, they made sure that they made their cut of everything, and then the monies that they made, they used to pay off the politicians of the territories to keep things in line and keep control. Eventually that changed, and law and the rule of law came, and things got better. But now we're in the same situation now, where folks are using the internet, and they're starting to realize all of a sudden that there's these people that control what you say and how it's seen to the masses. And so, my background in internet is I've been around since day one, literally from dial-up. I started a dial-up business in the 90s, and I saw the power of the internet then, that it was a level playing field. It was allowing anybody to get online. You could sell a product if you could get the word out, but you could set up a store. but you can also say something. And and back then it was blogs and places that people posted stuff. So not quite everybody, but eventually your search engine started picking up on that stuff, and your message starting to get out, and so it's a very powerful tool. Actually, I say this many times, that the internet is probably the most powerful invention man has ever invented. And it's because it gives one man, one woman, one person the ability to speak to the entire world, literally, with something as small as a telephone, smartphone in this case. But you can do it from your computer. Obviously, we know all that stuff. It's not new. But it's just, I think really people need to kind of comprehend that, it's literally the most powerful invention known to man today. It's more powerful than a jet, plane. Ideas and concepts can motivate people to do things, and to change ideas, to change the way they think. And that can be very frightening to some people who were in control of that for the longest time. And that's our dreaded mainstream media. And it's kind of funny how we got to this point, because they are regulated. Cable TV, satellite, broadcast TV, they're all regulated. And they've been able to collectively grow in power and influence over our country. And people don't really understand it. They talk about the 6 media companies that own most of the media: satellite TV, satellite cable, broadcast. They're in 35 million households a day. And at 128 million households in the United States, it's about 50%, 55% of everybody in this country gets some kind of exposure to the mainstream media, either through over the air broadcast, or satellite TV, or cable. And that's quite a bit of people. I mean, just look at these numbers. Almost start at the bottom at Viacom. They're the Comedy Central, TV Land, not really Paramount Network, Nickelodeon.
Before you do that, go back to the other one. You said there were 120 million households, but you said it was only 30 something million. So that's not 50%. I just want to clear that up.
Yeah. So no, I'm sorry. I break it down into people in the country. So there's more people in a household than one person. So it's roughly about. Actually, I'm sorry. I missed the number. That's what you're right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at my notes here, and I see 35 twice. So it's 35 million households that get their television services from cable, and another 35 million that get their television through satellite. And so when you add that up, 70 million people, that's about half of all the households in the United States, based on 128 million.
Exactly. That makes it makes more sense. So you were going to go through like Viacom and each one of these. What they're doing?
6 corporations actually own all of this content, or own the delivery mechanism that the starting points. And so Viacom, at $13 billion a year revenue, and then from there you go up to CBS, which they're still kind of a small player. They're running CBS News and Showtime and the Turner Classic Movies and various other cable TV news, CBS News. And then you go to 20th Century Fox. They're at $29 billion a year, and they own obviously Fox News. Then you take a big jump over to Disney at $55 billion. And they're your ABC News and a lot of your movie houses. And then another big jump up to Comcast, who owns NBC, MSNBC, and all the NBC affiliates. And then the biggest player, which I was kind of surprised, although I guess I should have not been surprised because I've been in this industry long enough to see this, but the biggest player at $190 billion is AT&T. And they run a lot of channels, one of which is the CNN and headline news, and so they really these 6 companies are almost in charge of everything that at least half the country sees. But the cool thing about this is that the public
meaning
is
like that's not internet based, kind of.
Right. They see people are television broadcast is still a very powerful tool because people inherently are lazy. and don't take offense to any of your listeners, but I
Hey,
want to sit
it
down.
can be true. It can
I
be
want to
true.
sit down and just channel surf. I don't want to have to do a lot of work, and but things are changing, and so there's this thing called cord cutting, and the cord cutting phenomena has kind of led to what's going on with why people are going to the internet. So they want to save money because they're realizing that these corporations are kind of misleading them in a way, and they want now there are other things they can do on the internet. When I was in a dial-up industry, Microsoft came up with this thing called Web TV, and it was literally a box that you plugged into your dial-up modem, and they had something on there called video. I think that Arrested Development was the first show that I saw on this dial-up internet video on demand service, which was so pixelated and so chopped up that it was really terrible. But at the time, in the mid to late 90s, it was the greatest thing, right? Because it's almost like free, and I can watch it when I want to watch it. So it was the predecessor to what we have today with Netflix. But people are cutting the cord, and they say they can get their news from Google and Twitter and Facebook, and this is kind of an evolutionary thing. But now 33 million people are cutting the cord and watching over-the-air TV, free TV, and using
So
over-the-top internet services.
So as the market share just continues to kind of, I think, get divided up, and they keep losing it to this internet-based thing, this is kind of where we're talking about the need for this Internet Bill of Rights could be very valuable, because, look, we know that they are basically coming on and they are censoring and they are deciding what gets to go, what doesn't get to go. And so let's talk about your idea for the Bill of Rights, the new concept that would be more administered by the people, not by the government, because we've talked about how, what would happen is if it goes to government, as you said this to me, it's going to get watered down. And that makes total sense. You have these large companies, Viacom, everybody else, AT&T, who are going to send their teams of lobbyists to Capitol Hill. And all they're going to do is basically take whatever kind of protections that are going to be built in for us on the internet, and they're going to make them basically completely able to be worked around. And so I want you to kind of explain to the audience right now what your proposal is for what an Internet Bill of Rights would look like that was by the people.
Well, so these companies, Twitter, Facebook, and Google, they're private companies, okay? They're not regulated utilities, and the concept of making them regulated utilities is probably a really bad idea on a variety of levels, none of which are partisan type ideas. Innovation is the domain of the private sector, and I don't think these should be regulated like a utility at all, because it will just restrict them. But these companies make a tremendous amount of money. So if you were to consider regulating or coming up with regulations, which I have worked with Google in the past on past regulations, Google, Twitter is at the bottom right now with about $3 billion a year in revenue, up 25% from last year. Facebook is at $55 billion, so they're right there in line with Disney, up 37% from last year. And then Google at the top of the heap at $136 billion. I mean, these are huge numbers. So any type of regulation will be influenced by these companies lobbying, because they all have lobbyists in DC. So they will have their opinion heard, and so things will have to be structured for these, any type of law that's in favor of them or seems to be in favor of the public, but they know how to work around it. Because, the one thing that these people know at these levels is how to work the system, okay? My first introduction to telecom lawyers was at an event that WISPA held in Alexandria. And it was at the Sheraton Hotel. And we just had a little tiny group of people, probably about 20 people. And we had some people from the FCC come. But for some reason that day, the entire second floor, Arboretum, was filled with suits, black suits. That's the suit you wear in DC, is a black suit. And it was literally the entire DC base of lawyers working for Verizon Telecom. Okay? So, when you see the level of effort they put in their legal forces to work around regulations to help craft regulations that they can profit from, you can see the futility of this. And so, again, you come back to the fact that, these companies are private companies. And, I've said this before when the government man wanted to regulate the internet on my side of the, as an ISP, because I'm also a broadband service provider. And my first notion was, hey, this is my network. This network I paid for. There's no government subsidies out there. There's no public infrastructure out there. If I decide I want to sell, an internet service which is really bad, it's my business to do it. And throttling and blocking and whatever, it's not in my best interest as a provider to do that. So there's no reason why I would do that. My company, as an internet company, has taken advantage of the fact that, my customers want Netflix. My customers want Google, YouTube. They want these things. They want to have access to all these services. And so it's my job to provide them a pipe to do it. I have no interest whatsoever, nor do I have the leverage to capitalize on any of that stuff to push my own content. I also don't care about spying on people's information and privacy. So, none of that stuff's of any interest to me. I just want to provide. So regulation, to me, is always going to be bad. Heavy-handed government is always going to be bad. It's always
and to clarify for the people watching out there, so you're saying as an internet service provider, which is you're on the smaller side of the scale, where you're going to people and saying, look, I know you live out here, maybe a little more rural, maybe a little more outside the city, and your internet's not great. You're with AT&T, you're with CenturyLink, you're with whoever. And you're saying, well, here, I have an alternative. I have a faster service. I have a faster provider. I can be a faster provider for you because you have a business that needs to be, streaming all the time, or you're streaming yourself all the time, you and your family. And what you're like, to kind of draw this back to what we were talking about with the Internet Bill of Rights and what we're talking about with like a buy the people solution, you're talking about some sort of agreement between internet service providers where they go to the actual big tech companies with an agreement that they've manufactured somehow that kind of has legal culpabilities for big tech when it comes to what can and can't be done. Is that kind of the gist of where we're headed?
So, the reason why these companies are so powerful is because of the public that uses them. Okay, the people give government power. The people give Twitter, Google, Facebook power. And so the relationship is between these corporations and the public at large, who actually made them what they are. Without people, there's no Twitter. Without people, there's no Facebook and Google. If there's no people, there's no YouTube. Okay, so these things are very important, that the relationship between the public and the service provider, or in this case, an application service provider, which is what you call Google, has to be maintained, has to be set up. And so that's why these things became so popular. People built their businesses on them. People, are providing news and information and content and developing information. That's why these things are so popular. But then the 2016 election came around, and then they realized that all of a sudden people, sorry, my Google phone just noticed that I said Google, and of course it's spying on me. We all know that, right?
Oh no, you think that's an accident? You think it's an accident? Google's chiming in on our little conversation here. I'm sure they have a lot to say about this as well, but keep going.
So, and then the other thing is that, people have heard about, what Twitter and Facebook does with AI, okay? And so this comes back to the philosophy that, if it's legal to do, it's okay to do. Morality never fits into business, except for small business. And so these companies are doing what's legal. They're spying on you. They're using your information. They're using artificial intelligence, very powerful computer systems, to manipulate how they can maximize their revenue from you. And in a way, maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but what that does illustrate is that any laws that government will come up with, technology will outpace. I mean, it's been in our history that laws and ethics cannot keep pace with technology at all, and it's never ever going to change. And so it's very important that that laws and rules that are set to protect the public have to be in line with what's changing and be flexible. And when you talk about the government, they're like the dinosaurs. They're slow. They're like the Titanic. They're going to sink, and they're influenced by special interest. And so you need to take away all that stuff. The Underwriters Laboratory model and these other groups that are private organizations that set standards. Even the IEEE sets standards for internet technology that is not government run. And so having a set of rules, and I call them covenants in a way, that illustrate what's important to protect the public. And some of the things that I've seen that people talk about when it comes to internet censorship is discrimination. It comes down to discrimination. So a provider of services like Twitter or Facebook discriminates against a certain group, and they want the government to be able to give them the power to determine what is and is not allowable speech. And that's what's going on in the UK. And even Facebook had brought up, Zuckerberg brought up a couple of points. They want to be able to have the government say that Facebook can determine what is harmful content. They want to give rules.
Like what is hate speech, right?
Yeah. Yeah, establishing what is hate speech. They want to have rules that are like the GDPR or GDPR in the UK. And when it comes to privacy and general data protection, but those rules are also the same rules that have Tommy Robinson all janked up with the law right now. And so everybody knows he's doing the right thing. He's doing the right thing. He's spreading the right messages. But yet,
no, Tommy Robinson's a great example, because if you look at what's happening in London, it's the same thing they're trying to do here. But it's Orwell. It's 1984. They've just gone forward with the plan and said, look, we can control what you say. We can tell you that what you've said is hate speech. He hasn't even broken law in several instances, and he spent months in jail.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate what's happening there. And
so as a service provider, though, I can see what's going on. I know how the technology changes, and so I think that one of the things that we're trying to do at the American Priority Foundation is to set up what these rules could be and make them part of a user agreement. Either if you're an internet service provider, which we call last mile provider, like Comcast or Verizon or AT&T or our company, but also the same set of rules as an application service provider, which right now are completely excluded. In fact, some people ask me, well, during 2016 election period, when all this censorship was started and going on, why didn't net neutrality do anything? We had those rules in place to protect the public from unscrupulous, millionaire, billionaire corporations. Well, all these companies, Google being at the top of the list there, were instrumental in making sure net neutrality did not regulate them at all. They were unregulated, and they will always be unregulated.
Yeah, I mean, and to quote the actual document itself, it was Section 230 out of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which was talking about how it provided immunity from liability for providers and users of an interactive computer service. So that was basically, it gave these big tech companies immunity from being liable for the stuff put on their platform. But that was under the agreement that they wouldn't be publishers and they wouldn't be editorializing the information that was coming on their platform. But now they've used this excuse of, protecting freedom of expression, like I was talking to you earlier about. They've used this excuse of, well, we have to protect other people's rights to speak, so we can shut down other people who are threatening that. And that's where the problem comes in, because there's nothing to stop that kind of control and basically violation of your First Amendment rights, especially here in the United States, where we're like kind of obviously the last bastion of free speech in the world, it would seem.
Yeah. Well, so the kind of list of things that we talked about in my group about giving the power of the internet back to the people is probably the most important thing. Competition will, at the end of the day, solve some of these problems, but there has to be some kind of a synergy of economics for any of these social media environments, whether it's a company or an application or a protocol, to actually work. That's why the World Wide Web is so powerful. there's nobody that is in charge of web traffic per se. There's no, if you want to go to a web page, you don't go to this place and that's the place that goes to the web page. They created a protocol that anybody can use and people can make all kinds of applications that use that protocol. But social media right now is either Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, or some other company that has not nearly the number of people. We want to make sure that people can still talk. So giving the power back to the people is one of the most important things. So we need to stop the opportunity for corruption, okay? And that means that, things are going to have to change, I think. The internet today is still an experiment, okay? Social media is an experiment, and it's been a very successful experiment because a lot of people have a lot of things to say.
But do you not agree that social media has also become a disrupting force as far as free speech goes, and what the freedom of the internet has classically been since its inception?
Well, it's not necessarily that I think that social media has been a disruptive force. I think the ability for people to share ideas in a large manner and share those ideas with your neighbor, with the guy down the street, with the guy in the other state, with the guy on the other side of the country, with the guy on the other side of the planet. Those types of things are what make it powerful and disruptive. And I don't think that a lot of these people that developed social media, or they did, but I don't really think they understood that side of it. I think they saw, hey, if I have everybody looking at this screen, whatever it is, and I can run my ads across there, or I can display an ad that seems to be relevant to what you're talking about, or I can display an ad that seems relative to something you did yesterday on the internet somewhere else, then that's going to make money. And what it turned out to be is, the ability for us to share ideas like, oh, by the way, I believe in Donald Trump, I believe in a wall, and I am not a racist, and I'm not a xenophobe. And that's like, wait a minute, no, that's not right. I just, and I'm just saying this subjectively, I'm this other person who has a different opinion, and I said the exact opposite, so you can't be right. But that's not how it is. People don't always agree on everything, but because of the power of, we'll call it the computer, the power of the computer, garbage in, garbage out. You can, with a computer, you can make the same error 1 billion times a second, okay? It doesn't make it any better. It doesn't make it not an error. It's still an error.
Yeah, and as far as like what I was saying with the disruptive force is, yes, the guys who created YouTube, the guys working with the original PayPal guys who went out and made YouTube, they didn't think anything past like, hey, this would be a great idea. We can monetize it. We can make it great. But the disruptive force comes in later. I think it comes in now as big tech wants to step in and regulate what's free speech, what's not, and I think that's kind of what you're trying to answer. What the Internet Bill of Rights in general will be trying to answer to is the fact that these companies, they've come in and taken something that was, they've basically made themselves ubiquitous with what is social media, and now they've started taking control behind the scenes, and they're starting to affect change that otherwise wouldn't be part of the internet as it originally was designed to be. And now you have state actors coming in, like governments, and they're saying they're just basically weaponizing it against their citizenry, and it is turning into like a dystopian thing. But that's basically the point I was trying to make.
Well, a lot of change is going to happen, but I think to start that change, we've got to the people have to set the rules. They have to set the tone. And so, giving the power back to the people, stopping the opportunity for corruption, prohibiting discrimination of any kind. I don't think people should be blanketly discriminated against in any way. And, I think a lot of people agree with that concept when it comes to race and religion, but it also becomes less clear when it becomes a matter of opinion. And so I think that, my wife and I had this discussion about racism one day, and, of course, I lost the argument because it was never going to be my side anyhow. But the bottom line,
you never stood a chance. It was just
we have a lot of laws in place that address with the symptoms of racism and people's feelings about other people. But I think people should have the right. Please understand, I am not a racist person, but people don't have to like everybody. and people could not like
No, no, no.
anybody
This goes
for
all the
any
way back
reason.
to the ACLU and protecting the right of even the neo-Nazis to speak, because it's a fundamental question about what is free and what constitutes free speech. It doesn't mean you have to endorse the individuals who are making these comments. You have to be able to provide a platform regardless of what's being said. And you can't start once you start going in and saying that this speech is prohibiting other person's speech, that's when you're crossing the line, in my opinion. Unless it's an actual incitement to violence, which has been categorically ruled on by the Supreme Court, saying, look, you can't do that. You can't walk in a movie theater, yell fire. You can't do certain things. Those have already been outlined, but now we're crossing the territory where you have an unelected group of basically big tech elites who are telling us, hey, this is hate speech, and they're using they're weaponizing their own ideologies and their own liberal bias against those who are conservative. And I always say this to people on the show. I say, if you think this is going to stop with us, you think that they're just going to stop. Like, if you think that the fact that I wear this hat outside today, I go outside and there's going to be somebody that calls me a racist, or there's somebody that's going to watch this video and go, wow, you guys got a Trump 2020 and a Make America Great hat on. He's obviously a racist bigot, when they don't know anything about me other than what I'm wearing. That's the biggest
Right.
problem to me. I think that's what this has to be about addressing. It can't be about like getting into the weeds of, hey, I'm not a racist. Well, you know what? There are racists out there, but they have the right to speak too. I don't support them. I don't condone them. I don't and I don't endorse what they do. But look, that's a part of the gig. That's a part of that's, as they would say, Sadiq Khan in London. It's part and parcel of the First Amendment, right? That
Right.
comes with it.
So yeah, no discrimination of any kind. I think that, and we address this, in other ways. But the other thing too is, the need for privacy, and that there's a couple different levels. There's the need for people that want to be anonymous online, and that's fine. That's their privacy. But data privacy is because there's no laws specifically on different levels of data privacy. Just like the phone just kicked in there and started talking to me. And I know that Google knows everywhere I go. They know.
Google knows everything. They know what we're talking about right now. If they
know.
wanted to, they could watch this whole thing in real time. And it's like, people are naive if they don't think that's true.
They know my buying habits. But privacy is really an important thing. And people say that we don't necessarily have a right to privacy, but I think inherently, as a species, we all have a right to privacy, because heretofore, our thoughts were always in our head, and nobody had the right to know what we thought. And now people are encouraged to share their thoughts online, on a blog or on something. And people are more than ready to share their thoughts and feelings, because you become really close again to this thing. This is my friend. Okay, this device tells me what the weather is. This device tells me how to get to the store or how to get to this place. This is my best friend in a way, psychologically. And so I have no problem sharing my thoughts and my feelings with it. But the problem is now this is now broadcast to everywhere.
Yeah, our dependency is our weakness in that sense.
People's privacy is important. The other thing too that people have forgot about, and this comes kind of with privacy in a way, is control over our data. So you can open up a Facebook or a Twitter account and be on it for 5 years and then decide you want off, and you delete and you close your account. Well, that data is not gone. The internet is forever. And if you want to get rid of anything on the internet, you're probably not going to be able to do it, or you're going to have to pay somebody a great deal of money to do it. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed with all these providers that we give our data to, that we give our information, our pictures, our thoughts, and our feelings, our videos, our audio recordings, anything that we give them. We should have the right for that to go away completely, not just deactivated.
Well, and it goes, I was just talking about this yesterday. We circled back around with the meeting that Jack Dorsey just had at Trump's Oval Office. And we talked about Cambridge Analytica, and we talked about Facebook. We talked about what they're doing with this private data, and how you do have, it's the whole right to be forgotten thing, right? You have a right to remove your information from these people, but apparently you don't. And they're not only doing it, they're monetizing it on the back end, selling it to third parties that you don't know. And they're looking you straight in the face and saying, what are you going to do about it? We're the most powerful company in the world. We've already got our protections and immunities. We're not beholden to what we're beholden to what the law says, not what the will of the American people is. And you could argue, well, the law is the will of the American people, of course. But there was no, back in 1996, for instance, when the Communications Decency Act was drafted and passed through, and Section 230 gave these immunities. Look, there was nothing like what it is today. There weren't smartphones. There wasn't Twitter. There wasn't Facebook. There wasn't YouTube. So I just hate the argument when they come and say, well, look, we're recovered. We've already taken care of this, already been addressed. It hasn't. And what you're suggesting to kind of bring this back around to what we were originally talking about is these set of protocols that are put in place by internet service providers through an agreement that is beholden to the application service providers, where they're all beholden to non-discrimination, basically to basically following the tenet principles of our founding documents in the Constitution with the Bill of Rights. And that's all we're asking for. Yet that seems to be what's the most unattainable or fantastical desire that they want to put down.
The part of it that I think that is being missed is that I think people need to have the right to speak freely, but they also need to have the right to censor themselves. So if, as a father, I censor my children as they grew from seeing things. We had special software on the computers so that they couldn't go to inappropriate sites, but that was my choice to censor them. We didn't take them to movies that exposed them to inappropriate things based on our feelings. And so I also don't want to see things, because the whole adage, you can't unsee what you just saw. I don't want to see stuff. I censor myself today from horror movies because I don't want to see them. I censor myself today from a lot of things, okay? And I want to have the right to choose what I censor, okay? That's what, so if stuff wants to be labeled, by the public as religious or political or mathematical or alphabetical or whatever they want to label it, educational, anything they want to do, they want to label it, pornographic, anything they want to do. I wanted the ability to self-censor. I want to censor. I don't want to see porn on Twitter and Facebook. I don't want to see people getting their head bashed in. I don't want to see lots of things.
I agree. I think that's a totally valid point. And I do believe that, the first of all, like the guidelines, a lot of the guidelines that they use on some of these social media platforms, I agree with. Like you said, I don't want to see porn on my Twitter. I don't want to see violent, graphic violence on my Twitter or my Facebook or on YouTube. But there is that we're looking at the line and we're trying to decide where it should be drawn. And I think that's kind of where the conversation is to go into the protection of political speech, the protection, what is the First Amendment, and how does that really apply to non-discrimination as far as, with what's going on with these people. I can tell you some of these people who get their stuff pulled down. I was talking to you about this earlier. SGT Report does a channel on YouTube. They put up a video where they literally just referenced an article. It was an article, of course, maybe a controversial article, but it was an article. He pulled up an article, said, hey, this is a possible theory. Let's talk about it. Here's let's have some questions. So they go and they pull his video, and then they threaten to give him a strike. But then at the same time, like we talked about, you have like Childish Gambino, who has a song about, I think, This Is America, right?
Yeah.
Where he's simulating shooting a church choir and using a gun and putting it to somebody's head and pulling the trigger. And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, and that's got 100 million views. As Sean pointed out, it's got top tier advertising. There's no algorithm censoring that. But then people get kicked off of YouTube for half that. They get kicked off Twitter for a fraction of that. They get kicked off Facebook for a quarter of that. So this is the problem, I think, and this is the fine line that we're going to have to figure out where it is, and we're going to have to figure out a way to enforce these companies to follow, to not have a two-tiered system, to not allow one thing that's obviously a violation of what they say they don't allow, while at the same time, subjectively saying, well, because we're politically liberally biased, we're going to choose to remove this content because this guy's got a Trump 2020 shirt on and a Make America Great Again hat on. He's obviously racist. And this was proven, by the way, in Project Veritas. This was proven with the videos of their conferences after the President Trump won the election, they're up there crying. The executives were crying, telling him, how did we let this happen? Well, you're Google. You're basically just an aggregator of information for us. You're not supposed to be meddling in our election and picking winners and losers. And when they say, oh, well, like the Koch brothers just put a petition up on Capitol Hill with their lobbying groups, right? They just put this up on Capitol Hill. And the title of it was, the government shouldn't pick winners and losers, when it was talking about, the possible breaking up of these companies or some sort of, big action. What I thought was funny about that petition when I looked at it was they do pick winners and losers. There was an article that talked all about this. I talked about this in the last video. They do pick winners and losers. They chose to remove Alex Jones. They chose to remove Tommy Robinson. They chose to remove all these different individuals who were just exercising their free speech rights. And you want to claim they violate your content policies, that's fine. But the examples that I was given, like when Jack Dorsey went on Joe Rogan and they were talking with his lawyer about why they chose to remove Alex Jones and why they chose to remove all these people, there's like you said, like I was talking about, the Childish Gambino thing is the perfect example of why it's flawed and it's two-tiered.
Well, I think that our plan is to develop, these covenants and tenets that we will then promote as an internet bill of rights or something like that, that will protect the public the way they should be protected, in a responsible way. And we want to have these companies like PayPal and GoFundMe, and because we don't talk too much about, but they also censor and discriminate.
That's a whole nother can of worms too. They're opening up.
But to push these companies to start adopting these as part of their user agreements, and if their policies are in contradiction to these, the discrimination clause and various other things, they're going to have to change those policies. And so we're going to force, I think, this effort, just like the Underwriter Laboratory process made products safe. Because there was a time when you could go buy an electrical product and it would kill you, because it wasn't safe. Businesses, they were about, it was legal. If it's legal, then it's okay, right? And then Underwriter Laboratories came up with these processes to go through this process of testing. And then you as a manufacturer could put that stamp on there that made the public confident in your product as being safe and effective. And so we want to do the same thing with an Internet Bill of Rights. So we want Google to adopt this with the user agreement. We want Facebook and Twitter, all of these companies, to adopt these as a relationship between them and the user. And when they violate that, then it becomes back to, now instead of going to the Federal Communications Commission or the FTC, which are just impossible to deal with. But the bottom line, all they can do is charge fees, which is a cost of business. And I can tell you right now, the FCC doesn't even collect those fees in many cases, but they are still a cost of doing business for many of these companies. Just look at robocalling, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar business. And so when they get charged $100 million, it's an expense. It's not a problem. It's going to go on, and they're not going to stop. But, if the local attorney general in your district makes a phone call to Facebook and says, hey, I have a citizen here that you have violated, and you have just now committed a felony, and this is going to cost you going to jail, that will stop these things from occurring. And I think it will evolve the industry away from this thing that has become where you've got these monstrously powerful companies that are the hubs of these, the gatekeepers. They're the hubs. Okay, we went back from, the internet is not supposed to be like that. There's not supposed to be any gatekeepers. There's supposed to be, you can go any way you want. You got lots of paths to get from point A to point B, except Facebook, Google, Amazon, or whatever. You only got those guys. So the bottom line is that, we need to help craft these regulations or these agreements between the user and the application service provider or the internet service provider that has some teeth at the user's level. Hey, I'm calling the cops right now. You guys just did this thing to me. They're going to come arrest you, or they're going to get the DA on you, or that it's going to be a local thing, and somebody's going to jail. It's not you're going to have to plead this one out, but you're never going to do it again. And that's the kind of stuff we need to do, and that'll force this industry to change so that more people can do stuff with social media. They can create more applications. They can innovate more, but nobody will be in charge of it. Nobody will be in control of it to the point where there's a single point of control that's responsible for all this information
Well,
passing through.
2 points, obviously. First of all, it's a form of recourse for, like you said, the individual user who is completely powerless at this point in the game. I mean, we've come to the point where, they do whatever they want. You can't do anything. But then also it's about transparency. Wouldn't you agree? It's about being able to see what that agreement says, to be able to see, kind of more transparently into these companies. Like, we don't know what's in their algorithms, but I can guarantee you that they're working tirelessly night and day to make sure that content like this that we're going to be seeing here on the channel doesn't go viral, and it doesn't have the ability to grow past what they control it to be able to grow to. And I can tell you that
that's the thing, though. If it's legal, it's okay. Has changed to, if it's complicated enough they can't prove we did it, it's okay.
And that's exactly where we're at. And the biggest problem with that, I think, just to briefly talk about this, is what you're describing and what I'm kind of talking about here is that there is no transparency and that there's no recourse. So when you're missing those two things, then how is it legal? Well, it's legal because the laws have been structured the way they are. And they're taking full advantage of that. And that's where your idea, I think, comes in as something that is to me, it sounds like a great idea because, like you said, I don't want the government coming in on this. I've kind of thrown this idea out there to the people watching, the followers, saying, look, there's a few options. We can go with the government or we can find some other way. This would be that other way. And I think this could very much work, and I think we need to go and have more transparency, obviously, because there's, you can point to like a thousand examples, but I won't get off on a tangent or go down a different road. I'm going to keep it on the Internet Bill of Rights and what it is. So this doesn't even have to be called the Internet Bill of Rights. Like you said, it can just be a compulsory agreement that they all sign that says, look, we're going to follow a certain set of principal tenets. We're going to have a non-discrimination pact. We're not going to become editors and publishers on what we've sold to the American people as a free speech platform. For example, I just want to give you a few examples as we wrap it up here. Google's original intent, right back, Larry Page and Sergey Brin had a statement they put out back in 2004. Now, this is from a report that was leaked by Google where it talked about it was called the Good Censor, and it talked about Google's atmosphere of creativity and challenge has helped us provide, this is a statement from Google, provide unbiased, accurate, and free access to information for those who rely on us around the world. Now, that was their promise to us. Back in 2012, Mark Zuckerberg put out a statement saying, Facebook is a tool to create a more honest and transparent dialogue around government. Right. The result will be better solutions to some of the biggest problems of our time. And of course, Twitter, back in 2017, made a statement saying Twitter is the free speech wing of the free speech party. So when you take these kind of the ideals that they promised us and what they promised these platforms would be, and now you're seeing the complete reversal of that, that's why this kind of thing must happen. And that's why I'm glad you came on the show today to talk about it, because I think it's a very important issue, and it goes well beyond what happens with YouTube creators and demonetization, because that's one thing I'm always talking about. But it's well beyond that. It goes into the realm of what is free speech. Why do these big tech companies think that protecting free expression is more important than protecting free speech? And there is there's a defined difference there where they can shut down your freedom of speech to allow freedom of expression. And that's the problem, I think, that we're running into here with these companies more broadly. But I want to thank you for coming on. And do you have any closing remarks you want to make about this whole thing? I'd love to hear what you have to say.
So we're going to keep working on this, but this is going to be a topic that we talk about at the American Priority Conference in October down at the Trump National in Doral, Florida. And it's if you go to AmericanPriority.com, the website has not been updated yet, but it shall be online with the updated information by next week. But we are going to have a lot more time spent on this topic. We're going to try to bring some new people. We're probably going to bring back some old people that were also involved in the last discussion because we really need to get input from the public. I mean, I know from my perspective, all this stuff, what I see needs, but I like to get input from folks. And so the team that I'm working with now is mostly just owners of internet companies, because we've been in the business since the 90s, so we've seen it all the craziness. But we definitely want to try to make something and then start getting the public involved in promoting it. Because honestly, none of these companies will do anything unless the public demands it. And so if the public demands YouTube, adopt these rules, if the public demands Facebook adopts these rules, then these things will happen. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Okay, yeah, and that's totally a great point. AmericanPriority.com is where you go if you want to find out more information. I think that they're going to be getting that up and running really soon here with the conference coming up in October. It's in Miami, as he said, at the Trump National at Doral. And also, don't forget to go check out Alex on Twitter at PriorityConf. I think PriorityConf. Is that correct?
That's American Priorities Twitter handle, and then I'm Alex P. HSL.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So if you want to check out American Priorities Twitter, go to Priority Conf. If you want to go check out Alex Twitter, go check out what was it again?
Alex P. HSL.
Go check out Alex PHSL. Give him some love and tell him I sent you, because I think that this is really a big movement. And it's something that is just, even if this is just a starting point for a conversation, this is a conversation that needs to be had. And we got to keep pushing forward on it. But I want to say thank you so much, Alex, for coming here and joining me today on the show. And to all the people out there watching, in case you're seeing, this merch is available down below. You can go click if you guys want to check it out. Also, don't forget to hit like, share, subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this content that we bring you here on the channel. Again, thank you, Alex. Have a great day, and we'll see you all later.
Thank you.